Well, you didn't bring your trail rations, you guys are starving. You gotta go out and, or do you just bring that, if those have to be put in the house, we'll say, we're not gonna worry about those because that takes up too much time for the game. I don't know. Whether you have, sometimes you have a group that wants to play.
Yeah, that's something you want to decide beforehand. Setting, you sit your players down, in certain games, we're going to naturally distract that. But if you want to run a hardcore ropes and daggers D&D campaign, like D&D where you guys start from nothing and work your way up, your players may want that. Certain people like to micromanage. Like, people play Dwarf Fortress. I have no idea why. Alright, people laugh at that. Yeah, SimCity, like you can do Sim Adventure, and then sometimes when you hit a certain, like maybe that's fun from if you're a Dark Sun, how much water you have is really important. But if you're in Forgotten Realms and you're traveling through like farmland or whatever, especially if you're above a certain level where you're literally millionaires. But look at like a local like medieval economy versus fantasy medieval economy. Adventurers ruin economies because they go in there and they buy magic swords that cost hundreds and thousands of gold pieces. Most farmers make a copper in a month. Like, adventurers are so much richer than everyone else that food eventually may not become an issue.
The general advice I give is to decide, is something important to whatever story you're trying to tell. If it's not, drop it like a boiling hot cup of food. Drop it like a lava. Don't bother, let it get it out of there, get it out of the way.
If it's bogging things down and the players aren't having fun with it, it doesn't belong. That's pretty much the rule.
As a DM, what's a good way to deal with, I just don't think the nice way to say it, but players who aren't as smart as their characters?
That is a hard one. No, it really is. There's also playing, right, there's playing, especially somebody who's, or the opposite of that is someone who is physically smarter than the character. Sometimes, or more charismatic than the character. Sometimes you have the most charismatic person you know playing a low charisma or low intelligence character, standing up and making a speech. Sometimes the game mechanics handle that. Like, sometimes they don't have anything in diplomacy. You're like, all right, roll diplomacy. Sometimes you give them a bonus. Sometimes you give them hints. It all depends on what the player needs. Sometimes you let the dice know.
I was just wondering what advice you might be able to have for me and anybody else who thinks the way I do. Like the times that I've thought of creating a game, I have a mind that thinks on a grandiose scale. Like I will write that epic Lord of the Rings type thing about the end of the world and maybe a couple of subplot points. But then I'm just like, all right, where's the story or the here and now that I give the players that is the journey? So my problem kind of comes from that and from, managing all the entities. I want to have a lot of drama as well as, fun.
One thing you can do before the game starts, go to your players, your playing group, and say, okay, I want to do a game with this kind of situation, and figure out what about that situation sparks their interest. If you're doing, the grand end of the world thing, and people say, yeah, we totally want to be, the mighty heroes who save it, that's cool. If they say, wouldn't it be cool to be the peasant, the little peasant guy who just happens to get in the way of this and only survives? Everyone wants to play that kind of game, you can do it. So don't be afraid to discuss the idea with the players. Very rarely do you need to keep secrets from players. Like, there are often a few things you want to keep secrets, the big reveals of the plot. But big grand world things and even stuff that's going to happen in the future, don't be afraid to talk about it with the players and just make them aware. I think most people who have roleplay for any length of time are aware of this, of the distinction between character and player knowledge. If you trust people to do that correctly, most of them will.
I was about to say, what was the greatest plot book in any game that you played on today? Like the very beginning, the greatest, the one that really I can give you an example. and Matt's starting at 10th level, right? And he's like, don't buy here, I'll allow it for you, so you write down your stats. He goes, okay, give me your character sheets. Okay, yeah, I'll have amnesia, I don't know what you can do. What?
There's 100 different ways to start a game. You can either start off with, if you want to just go generic, okay, everyone meets at the same tavern at the same time, you're all friends, let's go. Or you could do something like, these orcs. The orcs have just raided your village. You are peasants. You have 1 year until they return. How do you defend your town from their attack? Like, you stay there, you farm to try to pay off the orcs when they come back. You go to the king to try to get help, and once you get to the king, is he going to help you? But yeah, there's different ways to hook your players into a game and all of that. And there's something you can start in Ravenloft. I think there's one game where everyone starts with a head.
The first favorite one I've ever used was the game where I started by describing how all the players died.
Wow. I definitely pulled an asshole move in second ed when I took everybody from third level in second ed immediately to about 15th or 16th level and then reset the entire game to 5th level after they beat the villain. They were mad at me, but kept going with the game and the characters. It can be a pretty drastic move like that. It worked, and I didn't get punched. I think we have time for like 1 or 2 more questions.
Well, I was just thinking on the topic of introducing the grand plot. One of the things that I've found works is to essentially get the players involved in some can generally get related to it. Like, say I run a game in Legend of Burning Sands, which is essentially Arabian Nights, but there's a villain who is doing this big, weird, magical thing that the characters really have no reason to care about, except that they were guards in the city and he murdered someone.
Okay. Let me just add, there's something about villains. Villains can change over time. One of the greatest things you can do to your players is turn a friend slowly into the foe. They can watch them change. And your rival doesn't always have to be like the evil wizard. It can be their nemesis. They have the same one. It could be the other party. The other party doesn't always have to be. What happens when 2 paladins have a conflict or they can't come to blows because they're both awful good paladins, but they may be striving for 2 different sides of the war. They're both nationalists. Like Evron has done this. With the churches and fun stuff. There can be 2 paladins for the same god fighting on 2 sides of battle lines because they have different national ideas. Each of them wants their country to go against each other. Each of them wants their country to win the war. But their other beliefs clash with the other players. Also, we gotta get going.
Yeah, we gotta go to the next panel. I think all of us will be around outside.
Yeah, we'll be running
real games, as well as the random guy who invented it, over in the gaming room.
Yeah,
there's like